All right, let's talk about booting for a minute. When you boot your computer up, your system, after it goes through a post, is going to be trying to find an operating system to boot to. Now, to make this boot work, we have to have somewhere set up within the BIOS a boot order so we know who to boot from. Now, in general, you want to boot off of wherever your Windows hard drive is located, but there are exceptions to this. For example, if you're installing Windows, you might want to be able to boot off your DVD drive so that you can install Windows. Or maybe you've got some little utility that's on a thumb drive and you want to be able to boot off of that. In order to deal with this, you're going to have to deal with boot order. And the place to go to is your system setup. So let's take a quick peek. So I'm going to boot into BIOS here. So if you look at the bottom, it says press F2 to enter the CMOS setup utility. It was really quick there at the bottom, but it was there. And I hit F2, so now I'm in here. So when we're talking about boot order, what we can deal with here, let's get in here, okay, is you're going to see somewhere in your system setup that allows you to define where you're going to be booting from. Now, at this point in the game, I only have removable devices, and in this case, I don't even think it has anything in there. It's a legacy floppy drive. I have hard drives, I got my optical media, and then I've got a PXE boot, which allows me to boot off the network. So, in order for me to boot off my CD-ROM drive, you'll notice that it's third in order here. Now, all of these guys are different. So in this case, I'm looking over here on the right, it tells me what to do. So all I have to do is hit the plus sign, and I'm now able to be booting off of my optical drive. If you want to boot off of a thumb drive, there's no problem with that. The only trick in that case is you have to make sure that the thumb drive is plugged in before you come into the setup so that you can actually deal with it. So the reason I don't see any thumb drives on this list is because I don't have any plugged in right now. But if I wanted to boot off a thumb drive, no problem. Plug in the thumb drive, come into your system setup, and your thumb drive will just show up like any other device. The world of boot order has changed a lot from that older CMOS. Back in the old days, you were reduced to having to always boot first from your primary master, then your secondary master, then your primary slave, then your secondary slave. Over time, we began to see more advanced boots, which would allow us to change the boot order within the system setup, and even begin to see things like boot menus, where when the computer boots up, you could actually press a button, sometimes F8, sometimes F10, depends on your system, where on the fly you could change the boot order, which was great. UEFI continues that tradition by providing a very robust boot methodology. So let's watch this happen. All right, now what I want to do is go into the boot order in here, and what we can choose, and we'll see it says boot option number 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is literally the order that it's going to go in. So in this case, it's preset. I've actually went ahead and installed Windows on this particular hard drive already, so it wants to boot there first. But let's just say I didn't. In that case, I could simply go, say, boot off of my hard drive first. Now, I don't want to do that. How about this? I'm installing Windows, so I want to be able to boot off of my optical media, and then I can choose my hard drives. Whoops, I missed. Then I can choose my hard drive secondly. Really, the only thing that matters is what are you going to boot from first. So number one, I want to boot off of my optical media. Now, I also threw a thumb drive in here, so I just want you to see this as well. If for some reason I wanted to boot off of my thumb drive, I could select that and it would boot from the thumb drive. The important thing is that they give you more than one option simply because of this. Let's say you've had Windows installed for a while, but every now and then you want to boot off of your thumb drive first. So I can set my thumb drive, and then secondarily, I can go ahead and set my Windows Boot Manager. The reason I would do something like this is I find myself from time to time needing to boot off of flash media. So every time I boot the computer, as long as there isn't a thumb drive in here, it will always boot to Windows. But anytime I throw in a thumb drive and boot the computer, it's going to go to that thumb drive first. Now keep in mind that thumb drive would have to be configured to be bootable, but if it is bootable, it's going to boot off that guy first. The secret to boot order is very simple. When in doubt, go into your system setup and see what your boot order is. You're going to see questions on the A+ that say things like, Timmy is trying to work on his system, and every time he tries to boot into Windows, for some reason he boots into a copy of Linux or something like that. And the answer is, he's probably got a Linux CD-ROM in his optical drive, and he keeps booting off of that because of the boot order. Also remember that most modern systems today have a pop-up boot order. Pressing F8, F10, it depends on your system, so it doesn't really care what is in your system setup. You can, on the fly for this one time, boot off of anything you want. I love that tool.